The story begins by showing John Creasy, a former member of the FBI's Special Forces, traveling to Mexico to meet his old friend Paul Rayburn. John was once the best of the best, known for his incredible skills in tracking and eliminating high-value targets such as leaders and generals. He had been sent on missions to various countries, cementing his reputation as a top-notch professional. However, after a personal tragedy, John decided to step away from the job and start a new chapter in his life. As the two men, Samuel Ramos and Jordan Kalfas, sit in the plush office of Ramos's automotive empire, they discuss the state of the market, the staggering debts owed by the Ramos family, and the dangerous kidnappings plaguing Mexico. In the face of such uncertainty, Ramos decides to hire a bodyguard for his beloved daughter. Enter John Creasy, an ex-member of the FBI's Special Forces unit. Rayburn, John's old friend, recommends John for the bodyguard position, and John sees it as an opportunity to leave behind his troubled past and protect those in need. John is then interviewed by Ramos, who is impressed by John's extensive military background but expresses concern about his bad habits, specifically his fondness for drinking. Despite this, Ramos decides to hire John, and he is taken to the Ramos household where he meets Ramos' wife Lisa. Lisa is equally pleased with John's experience and takes to him immediately, feeling that he is the perfect fit to be her daughter's bodyguard. John is then introduced to Lupita Ramos, a lively and cheerful young girl whom he will be tasked with escorting. Lupita eagerly shows John around the house, introducing him to her favorite spots and proudly displaying the room that will soon be his. As they spend time together, Lupita takes a liking to John, sensing a deep sadness within him that she likens to a grieving bear. In a touching gesture, she names her favorite teddy bear Creasy Bear after him. Next day, John begins his duties as Lupita's bodyguard, accompanying her to school with the help of a driver. During the ride, Lupita tries to strike up a conversation with John, eager to get to know him better. However, John responds gruffly, telling her that he's there to do a job and that he would prefer to focus on that rather than chatting. Lupita is taken aback by John's abrupt demeanor and feels hurt by his words. When they return home, Lisa asks John how his first day working with Lupita went. John, anticipating her line of questioning, firmly states that his job is to protect Lupita, not to be her friend. Lisa nods understandingly, but at the same time, she feels concerned that John's approach might hurt Lupita's feelings. John's past haunted him every night, filling him with guilt and regret for the countless lives he took during his time as an assassin in the military. He turned to alcohol as a way to numb his emotions, but it only seemed to make his distress worse. That particular night, he reached for the bullet that he always kept with him, hoping to end his suffering. However, it wouldn't fire. He was filled with confusion and fear, feeling like a higher power was stopping him from ending his life. As the rain pelted down in the dead of night, John stepped out into the wet streets. He called his friend, Rayburn, and asked if it was possible for a bullet to be held back. Rayburn's response was blunt and definitive, informing John that it was impossible, with a ratio of 1 to 1,000. However, as John stood there in the downpour, a figure caught his eye. Lupita, her face etched with sadness, peered out from the window of an upper room. Determined to lift her spirits, John took Lupita swimming the following day. He even treated her mother to a day at the salon. But as they drove down the road, John noticed a car following them closely. Quick thinking, he recorded the license plate number as a precaution. That day, Lupita was determined to win a swimming race. Despite her best efforts, she found herself struggling to place in the top 3. John, ever the supportive friend, stepped in to help. He recognized that Lupita's swimming skills were strong, but she was often thrown off by the sound of gunfire at the start of each race. Determined to help her overcome this fear, John began training with Lupita every day. He pushed her to swim faster and to become more confident in the water. With John's help, Lupita's performance improved drastically. On the day of the race, Lupita's parents were unable to attend as they were working abroad, but she had John by her side, cheering her on as she competed. All the hard work that Lupita and John had put in finally paid off. Lupita dominated the race, crossing the finish line in the first place. The two of them grew even closer as a result of their shared experiences, and they were often seen smiling and laughing together. It was a stark contrast to John's previously dark and lonely life. John had finally found a sense of happiness and purpose, and as a result, he began to abandon his destructive habits. He gave up drinking and stopped trying to end his own life. The light that Lupita brought into his world had given John a new lease on life. He was filled with a newfound spirit, grateful for the friendship and support that he had found in Lupita. One day, John takes Lupita to piano lessons. He was tasked with taking her to piano lessons, at her father's request, even though she had no interest in the instrument and preferred swimming. As John waited outside the piano lesson house, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. He noticed 2 police cars blocking the entrance and then spotted the same car with the same license plate that had been following them a few days earlier. As Lupita emerged from the piano lesson house, the suspicious car suddenly made a move toward her. John, quick to react, pulled out his gun and fired. Lupita immediately understood the danger and started to run toward John. However, tragedy struck when John was seriously injured by unknown gunfire. Lupita, seeing her friend in such a state, broke down in tears and ran to his side. Unfortunately, she was immediately taken by the kidnapping group before she could reach him. John was hospitalized and taken into police custody for shooting 2 policemen. When news of the kidnapping went public, the police chief held a press conference to address the matter. However, it was soon revealed that the kidnapping case was a fabrication created by corrupt police officers in an effort to improve their image in the public eye. But not everyone was convinced by the police chief's statement. Mariana Garcia, a female journalist, and Miguel Manzano, a police detective, both had their doubts about the official story. They were aware that all the police officers involved in the kidnapping case were corrupt. Meanwhile, at the Ramos residence, Lupita's parents were grieving over their daughter's kidnapping. A police lieutenant from the Anti-Kidnapping Division, Victor Fuentes, was also present at their home, offering his support and assistance. It was then that the kidnapper made a call, demanding a ransom of $10 million for Lupita's safe return. In the end, the ransom transaction took place as instructed by the kidnapper. However, it was thwarted by an unexpected party who seized the money and killed the person responsible for the exchange. The kidnapper was livid, feeling as though he had been deceived by Mr. Ramos. He declared the negotiations to be over, leaving the fate of Lupita, Mr. Ramos's daughter, uncertain. In a desperate attempt to save her daughter, Lisa picked up the phone and tried to negotiate with the thief. However, her efforts were in vain as the thief coldly informed her that it was too late, there was no going back. Returning to the hospital where John is being treated. With John's safety in question after he killed 2 corrupt cops, Manzano and Rayburn made the difficult decision to secretly remove him from the hospital and take him to a safer location. They couldn't risk John's life in danger any longer. Once they arrived at their destination, Manzano presented John with some pictures, but to their disappointment, John didn't recognize any of the individuals in the images. Manzano then revealed a shocking truth to John. The corrupt policemen were part of a larger organization known as La Hermandad. This union was comprised of corrupt officers and police who committed heinous crimes in Mexico. As John's health improved, he felt a strong urge to return to the scene of the kidnapping and search for any clues that might lead to Lupita's whereabouts. It was there that he was approached by Mariana, who offered her help and all the information she had gathered during her investigation. Determined to find Lupita, John then went to her room where he found a cherished teddy bear and her diary. As he was packing, Lisa entered the room and John shared his resolve to bring to justice everyone involved in Lupita's kidnapping. With a clear sense of purpose, John set out to gather the equipment and weapons he would need to launch his revenge. Utilizing the license plate information he had recorded, as well as Mariana's assistance, John was able to track down his first target. The owner of the car was Jorge Ramirez. He was a man caught in 2 worlds. He wore the badge of a police officer, but also had ties to the dangerous criminal organization known as La Hermandad. When John discovered Ramirez was connected to the recent kidnapping case he was investigating, he saw an opportunity for answers. John took Ramirez to a secret location and began his interrogation. Ramirez, feeling the pressure of his dual loyalties, was initially unwilling to talk, but John began to torture him by cutting his fingers one by one to slice his earlobe, and Ramirez eventually gave in, revealing that the mastermind behind the kidnapping was a man known only as The Voice. Orders were funneled to Ramirez through henchmen who worked as gatekeepers at a popular discotheque in Mexico. With this information in hand, John acted swiftly. He shot Ramirez in the head without hesitation and made sure the car Ramirez was in was involved in a fiery crash. With the information obtained from Ramirez, John made his way to the discotheque, where he hoped to find more leads. His tactics were as ruthless as they were effective, as he was able to coerce 3 of the Voice's henchmen into giving him information. They revealed that the discotheque was just a temporary location for the kidnappers before they were taken to the Voice's headquarters. John's pressure tactics continued to work, as the henchmen eventually caved and gave him an ATM card used to receive funds from The Voice. With this card, John could track The Voice's movements and close in on his whereabouts. But John also received unexpected information. Someone had sabotaged the transaction for Lupita's ransom money. This sabotage was carried out on the orders of the head of La Hermandad, none other than Victor Fuentes, an anti-kidnapping detective who had previously visited Ramos' house. John's investigation took a heartening turn when he discovered one of the abductees, a young girl in dire need of rescue. John acted quickly to save her, but his mission was far from over. In a fit of rage, he blew up the discotheque and took a moment to catch his breath. It was then that he met Mariana, a woman who would prove to be a valuable ally. John handed over the ATM card to Mariana, hoping she could shed more light on the transactions connected to The Voice. As John prepared to leave, he pressed Mariana for information on Victor Fuentes, the head of La Hermandad who was responsible for sabotaging Lupita's ransom transaction. Mariana confirmed that Fuentes was a highly protected individual, with a guard detail exceeding even that of the president. After learning the information about Fuentes, John began his plan. He He spent time surveying the area and found the perfect location for an ambush, a house owned by two elderly parents who lived near Fuentes' residence. With a plan in place, John set about preparing himself for the impending attack. He kept a watchful eye on the road, waiting for the moment when Fuentes and his entourage would pass by. When they finally appeared, John took aim with his RPG weapon and fired, striking the lead car in the group. John then went down and finished off all of Fuentes' men with a gun and a grenade. With precision and determination, he took out each and every one of Fuentes' men, leaving no one standing. Having overpowered all of Fuentes' men, John took Fuentes to a secluded spot under an overpass where they wouldn't be seen by any passing police helicopters. There, he revealed his ultimate plan to Fuentes. He told him that he had implanted a homemade bomb inside Fuentes' body and would give him just 5 minutes to live unless he confesses the truth. Fuentes was petrified, begging for forgiveness and finally admitting that he and his men were responsible for sabotaging the transaction. But to John's surprise, the bag he had fought so hard to retrieve contained only $2.5 million, the rest being nothing but worthless pieces of paper. In his desperation, Fuentes revealed that the person responsible for swapping the money for fake bills was none other than Jordan Calfas, Ramos' very own lawyer. A moment later, the bomb finally detonated, marking the end of Fuentes and his reign of terror. John didn't waste any time and quickly made his way to the residence of Jordan Calfas. When John arrived at Jordan's house, he was met with a shocking sight. Jordan's lifeless body was floating in the swimming pool. Undeterred, John pushed forward and went straight to Jordan's study, where he stumbled upon a bank account with a suspicious transaction, bearing the name of Samuel Ramos, Lupita's father. Realizing the gravity of the situation, John knew he needed to act fast. He reached out to Mariana, asking for her help in investigating the account, and with that, he set off towards Ramos' house. Upon arriving at Ramos' residence, John was armed with the information Mariana had uncovered about the bank account. When he saw Lisa, he asked her if she had any knowledge of the kidnapping plan. To John's surprise, Lisa was completely in the dark, unaware of any such scheme. John then turned his attention to Samuel Ramos, demanding that he produce any evidence he had to back up his allegations. Finally, under John's relentless questioning, Ramos was forced to admit the truth. He confessed that he and his lawyer Jordan had planned the kidnapping from the very beginning, with the intention of using the ransom money to pay off the debts of his failing company. Ramos revealed that they had intended to split the $5 million ransom, with $2.5 million going to Jordan and the other $2.5 million going to The Voice. As Ramos continued to confess the details of his heinous scheme, Lisa's anger reached a boiling point. She could not believe that her husband had been willing to sacrifice their only child for money. In the heat of the moment, she demanded that John take justice into his own hands and kill Ramos. But John was not one to give in anger and revenge. Instead, he gave Ramos a choice. He left a pistol, the same one that he had tried to use to end his own life but had become jammed, in front of Ramos and gave him the option to take his own life or face justice at John's hand. John then turned and left the room. As John left Ramos to face his own consequences, Mariana and Manzano continued their investigation. Through their relentless pursuit, they were able to track down the owner of the ATM card that John had given them. To their surprise, they discovered that the real mastermind behind the kidnapping and leader of The Voice was none other than Daniel Sanchez. The ATM card was held by his wife, Rina Rosas. However, Rina had gone into hiding, seeking refuge in a slum with her brother-in-law, Aurelio Sanchez. Meanwhile, Daniel was hiding in an unknown location. Determined to bring Daniel to justice, John traveled to Rina's hideout in the slum. However, upon his arrival, he was met with resistance from Aurelio, who shot John in the chest. Despite his injury, John did not give up. He fought back and managed to apprehend Aurelio. John then made a call to Daniel, making it clear that he wanted to meet with him face to face. He warned Daniel that if he was not willing to come forward, he would not hesitate to take out his anger on Daniel's family, starting with Aurelio and Reina, who was 8 months pregnant. John even accidentally shoots Aurelio's finger so that Daniel hears him and realizes that John is not kidding. Daniel was in a state of utter panic and fear as he realized the fate of his family was now in the hands of John. He was well aware of the motives behind John's actions and knew he had to act fast to protect his loved ones. With desperation in his voice, Daniel made John an offer that would change both of their lives forever. He proposed to exchange John's life for the life of Lupita. John was taken aback by the proposal, unable to believe that Lupita was still alive. Skeptically, he asked Daniel to prove Lupita's identity by giving her the teddy bear's name. Leaving the room for a few moments, Daniel returned with a crucial piece of information. The bear's name was Creasy. With this confirmation, John finally believed that Lupita was indeed alive and in Daniel's custody. John agreed to the exchange, but Daniel had one more demand. He sought retribution for the failed transactions that resulted in the death of his nephew. And so, John's life would be the price he would pay for his past actions. Without any hesitation, John agreed to the demands. He was willing to make this sacrifice for the young girl who had already made such a profound impact on his life. Along with Aurelio, John traveled to the designated exchange site, a bridge that loomed ominously before them. He also informed Lisa about Lupita's safety, and the two of them raced to the site to be a part of the exchange. As they reached the meeting place, Daniel and his men were armed and ready, holding Lupita tightly in their grip. But to everyone's relief, Lupita was very much alive and unharmed. John walked across the bridge, his heart pounding in his chest as he approached the exchange. In a moment of release, Lupita was handed over to John, and she ran as fast as her little legs could carry her toward him. The sight of Lupita alive and well was enough to bring tears to John's eyes. He never thought he would get the chance to see Lupita again, and the joy of this reunion was immeasurable. Without wasting any time, John quickly told Lupita to go meet her mother, who was waiting for her at the end of the road. Despite John's sacrifice, his fate was sealed as soon as he agreed to the exchange. As they walked back to Daniel's car, John was shot by Aurelio and lay dying in the back seat. But even in his final moments, John was at peace. He had accomplished his goal, to save Lupita and hold her one last time. Sometime later, Manzano finally caught up with Daniel Sanchez, and in a final act of justice, he took his life. And with that, the movie came to an end. The moral